All children except one grow up, and all children know that they will grow up. Wendy knew it just like all the others. Mrs. Darling was the chief grown-up in Wendy's life for a long while. She was a lovely lady with a romantic mind and a sweet, mocking mouth. Mr. Darling used to boast to Wendy that her mother not only loved him, but respected him. He was one of those deep ones who knew about stocks and shares. All in all, Mr. Darling was a practical, affectionate man. Wendy came first. For a week or two after Wendy came, it was doubtful whether they would be able to keep her, as she was another mouth to feed. Mr. Darling was frightfully proud of her, and he sat on the edge of Mrs. Darling's bed, holding her hand and calculating expenses while she looked at him imploringly.
Simply not sure if we can keep her married. What with the expense of the measles?
Oh, George.
Now, don't interrupt. I have £1.17 here and 2 and 6 at the office. I can cut off my coffee, say 10 shillings, making 2.96. With your 18 and 3, makes 3.97. Who is that? 8.97. Dot and carry 7. No, don't speak loud. Oh, and that pound that you lent the man who came to the door? Quiet, child. Dot and carry child. There, you've done it. Did I say 9.97? Yes, I said 9.97. The question is, can we try for a year on 9.97?
Of course we can, George.
Remember the mumps. Mumps £1. That is what I put down. But I dare say it'll be more like 30 shillings. Measles 1.5. German measles half a guinea. No, don't speak much. Nah. Say 15 shillings.
At last, Wendy just got through, with the 2 kinds of measles treated as one. Then came John, and finally Michael. There was the same excitement over John, and Michael had an even narrower squeak, but both were kept. Now, Mrs. Darling loved to have everything just so, and Mr. Darling had a passion for being exactly like his neighbors, so of course they had a nurse. As they were poor, this nurse was a prim Newfoundland dog called Nana, who had belonged to no one in particular until the Darlings engaged her. She proved to be quite a treasure of a nurse. Her kennel was kept in the nursery, of course. No nursery could have possibly been conducted more correctly, and Mr. Darling knew it, yet he sometimes wondered uneasily whether the neighbors talked. There was never a happier family until the coming of Peter Pan.
Now, you must know that I first heard of Peter while I was tidying up the children's minds. As everyone knows, it is a nightly custom of every good mother, after her children are asleep, to rummage through their minds and set things straight for the next morning, repacking into their proper places the many articles that have wandered during the day. If you could keep away, but of course you can't, you might see your own mother doing this, and you would find it very interesting to watch her. It's quite like tidying up drawers. You would see her on her knees, I expect, lingering humorously over some of your contents, wondering where on earth you would pick this thing up, making discoveries sweet and not so sweet, pressing this to her cheek as if it were as nice as a kitten, and hurriedly stowing that out of sight. When you wake in the morning, the naughtiness and evil passions with which you've gone to sleep have been folded up small and placed at the bottom of it, and at the top, beautifully aired, or spread out your prettier thoughts, ready for you to put on.
Occasionally, in her travels through her children's minds, Mrs. Darling found things she couldn't quite understand, and quite the most perplexing was the name Peter. The name stood out in bolder letters than any of the others, and she was a bit troubled by the thought of him. The longer Mrs. Darling gazed, the more she felt it had an oddly cocky appearance, and when she asked Wendy about it,
Yes, he is rather cocky. But who is he, my pet? He is Peter Pan. You know, Mother.
At first, Mrs. Darling did not really remember, but after thinking back into her childhood, she did just remember a Peter Pan who was said to live with the fairies in the Neverland. She had believed in him at the time, but now that she was married and full of sense, she quite doubted whether there was any such person.
Mark my words, this Nana's been putting some nonsense into their heads. Leave it alone and it'll blow over.
come from? I do believe it's that Peter again. Whatever do you mean? He never wipes his feet. Peter sometimes comes to the nursery at night and sits on the foot of my bed to play his pipes. It is lovely music, but I do wish he'd wipe his feet.
What nonsense you talk, Precious. No one can get to the house without knocking.
I think he comes in by the window, which is, of course, how the leaves got in.
But it is 3 floors up.
Mother, look! I found Peter's shadow. He must have lost it somehow when he was here last. Do you think he'll come back for it?
Are you sure it's not one of the boys' shadows, dear?
Oh no, it's all wrong in the shoulders. And do you see the set of the head? It could only be Peter's.
Yes, I see. Well, let's put it away for now. I have to talk to your father about what we ought to do.
Yes, Mother.
It had begun so uneventfully, so precisely like 100 other evenings, with Nana putting on the water for Michael's bath and carrying him to it on her back. On that fateful night, the Darlings were going to a dinner party with Mr. Darling's associates, and, as usual, Mrs. Darling had dressed early because Wendy loved to see her in her evening gown. After she'd arrayed herself for the party, she came into the nursery and found her 2 older children playing, and John was saying,
Mother! Mother! There's John. Look, we are doing it right. We are playing at being you and father. Wendy is you, and I am father.
Now let's pretend we have a baby.
I am happy to inform you, Mrs. Darling, you are now a mother.
But John, you've missed the chief thing. You haven't asked boy or girl. Although I'm so glad to have an adult, I don't care which it is.
That is just the difference between gentlemen and ladies. Now you tell.
I'm happy to tell you, Mr. Darling, that you're now a father.
Boy or girl?
Girl.
Boo! You're horrid! Dougal.
Well, we could have another.
Smashing.
I am happy to tell you, Mr. Darling, that you're a father again.
Boy.
I suppose so.
Oh, how wonderful I am! I'm happy to inform all listening that the Darlings and I'm the proud parents of a fearless young boy.
Can I be born too?
No, Michael, you don't want any more.
Nobody wants me.
But I do. I still want a third child.
Boy or girl?
Boy. Children, your father is a brave man, but he's going to need a special kiss before he can face his colleagues tonight. Father? Brave? There are many kinds of bravery, John. There's the bravery of thinking of others before oneself. Your father has never brandished a sword nor fired a pistol, thank heavens, but he has made many sacrifices for his family and put away many dreams.
Where do you put them?
In a drawer. And sometimes late at night, we take them out and admire them.
Are they pretty?
Oh, yes. A put-away dream grows prettier every day. So pretty, it is harder and harder to close that drawer. But he does, and that is why he's brave.
Just then, Mr. Darling rushed in, and ever after he would scorn himself for what happened next. He had been dressing for the party, and all had gone well with him until he came to his tie. Though he knew all about stocks and shares, he had no mastery of his tie. He came galloping into the nursery with the crumpled little brute of a tie in his hand.
Why, whatever is the matter, father dear?
Matter? Why, this tie, it will not tie. Not round my neck, but round the bedpost. Oh yes, 20 times have I been up round the bedpost, but round my neck, no. And I warn you of this, mother, that unless this tie is round my neck, we don't go to the dinner tonight. If we don't go to the dinner tonight, I don't go to the office again. If I don't go to the office again, we will starve, and our children, they'll be flooding into the streets.
Let me try, dear.
Why, thank you, dear.
Mother, what time is that tomorrow?
At 2 o'clock in the morning, dear.
I hope I don't wake you.
They are rather sweet. Don't you think, George?
There is not their equal on earth, and they are ours. but I sometimes think it is a mistake to have a dog for a nurse.
George, dear, you know Nana's a treasure.
No doubt, but I have an uneasy feeling that she looks upon the children as puppies. Take your medicine bravely, child.
I won't. Yes, you will, dear. And it will help you grow up to be a strong young man. Drink it down, Michael. I'll bring you a chocolate.
No, we mustn't. Don't pamper him. You see, Michael, when I was your age, I took medicine without a murmur.
That medicine you sometimes take, Father, is much nastier, isn't it?
Ever so much nastier. I would take it to you now as an example, Michael, if I had lost the bottle.
But I know where it is, Father, and I'll get it.
That most beastly stuff, that nasty, sticky, sweet kind.
Don't worry, we'll soon be over, Father.
I've been as quick as I could.
You have been wonderfully quick, my dear. But Michael first.
No, Father first.
But I shall be sick, you know, and we have the dinner party later.
Come on, Father.
I thought you could pick quite easily, Father.
That is not the point. The point is there is more in mine than in Michael's.
Father, waiting.
It is very well that you say you're waiting, but I'm also waiting.
I'm not frightened.
Neither am I frightened.
Then take it.
Well, then you take it.
I have a splendid idea. Why not both take it at the same time?
Wonderful. Are you ready, Michael?
1, 2, 3. Oh, Father.
What do you mean, oh, Father? Stop that now. I meant to take it, but I missed.
It was dreadful the way all three were looking at him, just as if they did not admire him.
Listen, all of you. I've just thought of a splendid joke. I would take my medicine and pour it in a Nana's bowl, and she would drink it, thinking it is milk.
But the children did not have their father's dark sense of humor, and they looked at him reproachfully as he poured the medicine into Nana's bowl.
Nana, good dog. See, I have put some milk into your bowl.
Oh, George.
Poor Nana. Poor Nana. That's right. Coddle her. Nobody coddles me. Oh dear no. I'm only the father. Why should I be coddled?
Not so loud, the neighbors will hear.
Let them breathe the whole world, but I refuse to allow that dog as a nurse a moment longer.
No, Father.
The proper place for you is the yard where you will be taken this instant.
You must understand, Mr. Darling was ashamed of himself, and yet he did not know how to stop himself. It was a terrible thing to play such a mean trick on Nana, but he didn't properly apologize until it was too late. In the meantime, Mrs. Darling had put the children to bed in unwonted silence and lit their night lights. They could hear Nana barking.
Why, that's not Nana's unhappy bark. That's her bark when she smells danger.
Are you sure, Wendy?
Oh, yes. Why do you think Carmel's acting like
Nothing, precious. They are the eyes and mother leaves behind the dark.
Oh, well, I'm glad you.
And they were the last words she was to hear from him for a long time.
Oh, my dear, we mustn't be late.
Yes, dear. Although it would feel better if Nana was at least inside. Something
should-
about the air tonight seemed to be a little chip.
We should have a dog for a nurse any longer. The night lights will have to do.
And for a moment, after Mr. and Mrs. Darling left the house, the night lights by the beds of the three children continued to burn clearly. They were awfully nice little night lights, but soon Wendy's light gave such a yawn that the other two yawned also, and before they could close their mouths, all three went out.
Tinkerbell! Tink! Where are you? Oh, over there.
Why are you crying?
What's your name?
Wendy, Moira, Angela, Darling. And you're Peter Pan, of course. Is that all of your name?
Yes.
Where are you from? I mean, where do you live?
Why, Neverland, of course. Second star to the right and straight on to the morning.
Why, that's a funny address. Where's your mother?
I don't have a mother. And I was crying because I can't get my shadow to stick on. Besides, it wasn't done with.
It must be sewed on, and I'll sew it on for you, my little man. I dare say it will hurt a little.
Oh, I won't cry. I never cry. Oh, the cleverness of me!
You braggart. Of course, I did nothing.
You did a little, I suppose.
A little.
Wendy, of course I'm pleased with myself. But Wendy, one girl is more youth than 20 boys.
Do you really think so, Peter?
Yes, I do.
I think it's perfectly sweet of you. I'll give you a kiss if you like.
Thank you, I'll take it.
Don't you know what a kiss is?
I shall know once you have given it to me. Now, shall I give you a kiss?
Yes, please. I'll wear it on this chain around my neck.
When people are introduced, it is customary